The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF.
Hi, my name is Charmaine and I use she, they pronouns. Welcome to our panel discussion for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing your time with us. The name of our panel is What BIPOC, so what Black, Indigenous, People of Color, Women in Films Know, Pleasure, Sexuality, and Power. And today's discussion looks at how historical expectations and present-day limitations on women's sexuality affect their personal, political, and economic development. So we have an esteemed panel today, and I'm going to go ahead and invite them in so that they can introduce themselves, and we will get started with our conversation. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, thank you all so much for being here with me and with us with the film festival today. It's so great to have you all. So please go ahead and introduce yourselves and let us know as much or as little as you would like for us to know about you.
I'm happy to start. I'm Shaniqua Roach. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an assistant professor of Black feminist theory and queer studies at Brandeis University. My research intersects issues of state violence, Black feminist theory, and Black women in Femmes, quotidian and popular performance work. Glad to be here.
Hi, my name is Linnea Sproles. I am a visual artist. I work all across different types of mediums. A lot of the work that I make in my body of work centers around femmes, Black femmes and their bodies and pleasure and power. And also it's pretty cathartic and reflects a lot of the hardships that I go through every day as a Black femme myself. And how we associate with the Black femme body and how we perceive it against other bodies as well.
Hi, everyone. My dog is barking, just of course, right at the moment. But my name is Elle Halo. I'm an LGBTQ health equity advocate. I am a Black trans woman. And I serve in the community in multiple positions, but I am most proud of my HIV and STI prevention work and my work to educate people about sexual liberation, about body positivity, and about identity, and what it means to stand in those things, what it means to self-advocate for those things, and to have representational visibility towards like our goals. Yeah. And I also serve in other ways. And I am a musician, a singer, and a writer. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all for that. All right, so let's jump right into questions. And just a reminder for those tuning in, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat and we will get to them. And also for Elle, Shaniqua, and Linnea, if you all have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask those questions as well. All right, so what do you know to be true about BIPOC women in films? I'm sorry, let me start again. So what do you know to be true about Black, Indigenous, people of color, women in films, pleasure, sexuality, and power?
State power has always had a deep investment in our subjugation, and we have always been kick-ass at resisting that subjugation.
I always feel like empowerment is something that we believe that doesn't belong to us and something that we don't necessarily associate with the Black femme body. So that's what comes to mind right away. And also that pleasure oftentimes feels like a privilege and not necessarily a right. I think a lot of times Black femmes spend their whole womanhood trying to, or their femmehood, figuring out what their power means to them. Yeah.
For me, I definitely think first that the patriarchy and the gender binary and our revisionist history of sex and gender and sexuality holds all of us back, holds us back as a community, holds us back in terms of relationships, in terms of romantic relationships, family partnerships, um, and finding those things in sustaining and realistic ways and not Eurocentralized and romanticized ways. Um, I definitely agree with what Linnea said, that we often, as femmes, don't identify with even considering that our pleasure should come first, or that our identity, or that our beliefs or stance in a relationship should come first. Um, and they should. And I just like to tell people that in terms of you should be a leader in your love life, you should be a leader in your relationship. And it shouldn't be something where you feel held back, or it shouldn't be something where you can express yourself or even explore things together, or explore yourself and being penalized or being shamed for having that autonomy comes to mind. And being, I don't know, being told that we have to conform. And just with the frame of the question, what do we know to be true? We've always known those things to be true. We've always known that even inside of a relationship, sex isn't the foundation of a relationship and isn't the thing that makes people connect with each other and commit to each other and make those commitments um, wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm curious if we could take a few steps back and think about how we define pleasure, because I'm not sure that we always know what it looks like when we see it or even feel it, in part because of state powers, transhistorical and ongoing investment in policing, surveilling, invading the lives of Black women and femmes.
I would like to add that I think, to answer you, Shaniqua, like I think oftentimes pleasure is pleasure, and just anything like with queerness and the experience is often associated with whiteness. Growing up as a queer person of color, and like I think my family was shocked when I brought home a white partner, but behind their backs, I was, before I came out, I was dating a lot of Black femmes, and they had no idea. But as soon as I brought home my white girlfriend, I think that's when they realized that I was queer. And I think it has something to do with associating that sort of experience as being a white person.
Absolutely.
But this was an experience that finally I felt like very free to be myself.
Absolutely.
And why does my freedom and why does my love and all that care have to be associated outside of myself and with whiteness, is something that I'm very interested in understanding. And I think that sometimes the basis of pleasure is rooted in white supremacy, and our understanding of pleasure is ultimately a white thing. So
Absolutely.
I definitely echo both Shaniqua and Linnea. I definitely, while you were speaking, Linnea, thought about the over sexualization that all of us endure, as Black people first, as Black and
Yeah.
BIPOC people first. The exoticism and the over sexualization of us, just based off of our heritage, and just based off of the history that comes with our heritage. Um, and particularly when Linnea spoke, the over sexualization of lesbians and of bisexual women in this instance. But what I mean by that is that while you were, whether they knew or not, while, like, you know what I mean, like the ways that we take things apart, um, and dissect them, with our bias. Like, while seeing you with another Black femme partner, um, is not that whole realization, because it's still that over sexualization. Like, that's, oh, this is just a experiment. This is a night. This is a, you know what I mean, a girl's thing. This is a, you know what I mean, those types of things that come inherently in our just radically over sexualized culture. Um, and again, that we're just all held back by these limitations, and definitely like how the over sexualization impacts us, and how our Eurocentralized standards of looking at our bodies and looking at beauty, looking at sexuality and sensuality, um, are, and just like as a culture. And like, you know what I mean, we know that though, that it isn't just one thing that makes a woman or makes a femme or makes someone sexy or makes them attractive. It's the completeness of who they are, and that's something that's lost in the ways that we think about just all of our relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I ground my definition of pleasure within Black lesbian feminist poet Audre Lorde's work, and specifically her conception of the erotic as a kind of internal resource that lies, I'm quoting her, in a deeply female and spiritual plane. So pleasure feels like spiritual practice, it feels like aesthetic practice, it feels like looking good, it feels like feeling good, and interrogating the threshold that you all mentioned between our hypersexualization, for example, and what it feels like to be in my body, to aestheticize my body, to have things done to my body, etc. So pleasure feels like a consistent and really principled practice. It's an anti-racist, anti-misogynistic project.
I agree. And I also feel that very strongly that there is, inside of this conversation, like we haven't even begun to talk about reproductive justice and like eugenics and the assault on Black anatomy itself, in terms of, regardless of your identity, in terms of passability politics as far as transgender and gender nonconforming people, and pressures to alter and change our bodies, to the Black man, to into our Black cis brothers being completely regarded just in terms of their sexuality or their sexual prowess or their physicality, to the ways that all of us are over sexualized as femmes. And lastly, I just wanted to add that the ways that the over sexualization affects us and the trauma that comes with it, and how that also impacts and stifles your ability to express and to express things in a healthy way for you, in a healthy way in terms of us all as young adults and as teenagers, in terms of our development, and different things like that. Like, I was a young, uh, I don't even know how to say it, but like a child sexual assault victim. And it definitely impacted me specifically that I waited, you know what I mean, for not necessarily a long time, but longer than my peers, to begin to have physical relationships of my own. And it's something that I struggle with a lot in my past identity of was even able to be, again, able to express or being able to even find or actualize or have partners willing to supply pleasure, and being able to find that in other people and find that connection in a healthy way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was great. I think I think we all have different experiences of what our sexuality means to us and how we perceive our bodies. And I think coming out a little bit later, I think it made me realize how much I relied on cis hetero males to inform my pleasure, and how much a lot of the heterosexual activity that I participated in was impulsive. I think that's just like the level of expectations that I had living in a body as a woman, and like even the expectations I received from my community and my family. And, I was only doing what I was told to do. So, and I think once I realized that my pleasure was like sort of boundless, like it was more than just the sex that I was having. But it was also the sort of people that I like to connect to sensually and emotionally, which were women. I think it made me realize how much I actually wasn't that attracted to men. And I think about that very, very often, and I try to explore that even in the artwork that I make. And some of the work that I make is just more about my journey into like becoming myself and becoming my more authentic self. And I think sometimes finding your own pleasure is tied to your authenticity. And I think it's very crucial that people have access to exploring that so they can get to that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both for sharing. Not to keep connecting this back to Audre Lorde, but Lania, there's a line in Uses of the Erotic where Mama Audre says, there are certain forms of connections that remain unavailable to us when we're not doing that decolonial work to process, unpack, unleash internalized biases that we've been taught from jump, and often like out of a politics of safety. So I think about my grandmother, my mother, who were frequently teaching a pedagogy of vulnerability. So as a Black girl, you know not to sit on a man's lap. Like as a Black girl, you know not to stay out late or want to sit like that. Somebody might perceive you as fast, right? And I don't castigate the women in my family for sharing those lessons, because they were trying to protect me from a white supremacist culture that did not view like Black femme bodies, Black girl bodies as sexually sacred, right? So goodness, when that's the lesson you internalize from jump, it's really easy to get wrapped up into cis heteropatriarchal logics and to enter into heterosexual partnerships of safety. I relate to your story in terms of coming out later and then performing erotically, sexually in really compulsive ways. So this is the script, yes. This is the way I'm supposed to show up. This will keep me safe. Yes, okay. Another Black feminist collective, the Combahee River Collective, says, for working class Black women, and that's my class background, straightness is often the only thing like Black women have to lean on, give state power and a carceral state investment in subjugating us. So yeah, that seems like a tool for some, but I don't know, for Black queer femme and femme adjacent folk, that safety tool might have to be abandoned in favor of unleashing your own pleasure, because it is all about authenticity and standing in your truth, as the kids like to say.
Absolutely.
I will argue that following following a cis man partner while you're a young person is an easy way to not ever find it. Like, it's an easy way to not ever get
Yes.
there to the pleasure
Absolutely.
part. And the part
Yes.
where things are being handled, being framed, where you're being not enticed, but like being intimate in the way that would be pleasurable or, you know what I mean, exciting and pleasing to you or to us as femme people. And that, again, them always having that control and having the patriarchy to sustain the control, and that we're just framed to always have to be pleasers, and how one-sided, of course, that is the very definition, you know what I mean? Like, the very definition of the term is that it's one-sided, but that's automatically our role and automatically something that they have, that partners have dominance and control over. And when we're intimate, is controlled by our partner and not us. And how we're being intimate with each other and where we're being intimate with each other is all controlled by the patriarchal part of the relationship. Even when that's us perpetrating it with ourselves and only, you know what I mean, not speaking up, not taking the lead and doing something adventurous or trying something or being expressive with them, with our partners, and just kind of opening the door back. And I think both parties, because they just don't know, you know what I mean? Because they just don't know, you know. So I think when we don't have that full essence of our femininity and that full control of our sexuality, you know what I mean? We're both like, it's like both parties are led astray. Like, that's when we both can't necessarily be on the same page.
I love that. I love what you said. And bringing a concept like patriarchy, which often seems like loose and ungrounded and over there somewhere, and talking about the way in which it structures, like relationships in the bedroom. So I don't know, when we get that everywhere in our culture. So magazines, television shows, film, you know, like sex is structured around male pleasure, cis male pleasure in particular. I've been rewatching The Game. Has anyone seen that?
Yeah.
The Game.
Yeah.
They put it back on Netflix.
They have been younger than us, honey.
Oh, yeah, I think
Maury, y'all don't know with Tia Maury.
Yes.
Yes.
She spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to sexually please, like, her cis male partner, but you know, femme pleasure is never even part of her vocabulary. And that's devastating.
And while you were sacrificing like that, he still was cheating and
Absolutely.
and lived his best life as a football player while you dropped out of school and fell off the
show. Things that we have to sacrifice just for an ounce of pleasure is horrendous. Even in media, it's like, this is my expectation. Like,
absolutely. And media is like training and conditioning our expectations, right? So I don't know, I've been really into taking in content that feels pleasure-centered, and for Black femfolk in particular. So before we got on, I mentioned P-Valley, Katori Hall Show. Goodness, is a beautiful cultural production which seems deeply invested in centering Black femme pleasure. So even as Black women are laboring, and as the show frames it, out of material necessity, like the strip club is a space of Black femme possibility. So like everyone is watching the kids of one character, and one character is gearing up to do her last dance at the strip club. And when she enters into the backstage area, like, all of the other dancers and women are there to adorn her with new lace, and they're rubbing coconut oil on her body, and she's looking beautiful and thinking about how she's going to work the pole with such precision and expertise. Like that feels to me like Black femme pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same vein, I wanted to refer back to, can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Good. So, Shaniqua, you touched on this, or touched on Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, that erotic as power. And so she says that the erotic, for our pleasure in this instance, offers a well of replenishing and provocative force to the woman or femme who does not fear its revelation or succumb to the belief that sensation is enough. So I know so far, like a lot of the conversation has been around what it means to be a femme and really to consort ourselves almost and expel so much of our energy and our resource in trying to figure out how to please cis het men. But outside of that, when particularly Black and femmes and women of color, when we tap into our possibility, when we tap into our pleasures, I want to know from your own experiences and observations, what do you believe is made possible through pleasure?
Radically different ways of being. Goodness, it was, let's see, I was in grad school and I was telling someone a story about how I was frustrated because someone tried to perceive me in a particular way, and how that felt uncomfortable for me as a Black woman. And she said to me, and I opened up like to another Black woman. So sharing vulnerability, just want to walk it through as praxis. And she said to me, it's because you're femme. And just hearing that language, it opened up a new gender possibility model. Oh, okay, so as femme, like my goal is not necessarily to like please a cishet man in any position of power. Like this is not about me making myself more palatable for a white institution. This is about me and what that looks like and how that feels. And because of femme's undefinability, in that moment and even now, like I think we all defined it in radically different ways, even as we identify under that kind of umbrella term. It meant possibility, it meant spontaneity, it meant play, it meant chopping off my hair and dyeing it white blonde, or maybe rocking like a Remy weave the next month. It meant like showing up and not necessarily smiling, because that's the expectation of women. It meant showing up and not necessarily wanting to do domestic chores that some man some time ago like marked out as the responsibility and purview of women.
I definitely related to, again, like passability politics or passability language that trans and non-binary people have to endure. And again, the ways the gender binary impacts all of us. But just being frank, like I don't even think that I liked having sex before I was before I transitioned. And that was off of a lack of knowing my body, a lack of knowing my role, my actual like real role inside of my relationships and inside of a sexual relationship, and having to struggle to find that. And I think for all people, I think we just overcomplicate things so much. And like I like to just tell people, as far as identity, regardless of what the end product of the identity is you're born, and then you're young, and then you grow. And we shouldn't be what we were when we were kids. We shouldn't be what we were when we were teenagers. We shouldn't be what we were when we were younger adults. We should always be growing. We should always be developing ourselves and being intentional about developing yourself first. And being able to define yourself outside of relationships and outside of your sexual history, in your current, you know what I mean, even outside of your current relationship. Um, and like, I think that what becomes possible, Charmaine, and to Saniqua, relating it back to P Valley. I love P Valley. Y'all got to watch P Valley, and it's also the work of an amazing producer and writer named Patrick Ian Polk, along with Katori Hall. You said Katori Hall, and I think that what becomes possible is that real affirmation, and is again that whole sensual person and that whole you know what I mean, sensuality and developing that. And like, I will argue, you know what I mean, like, if you know how to be sensual, if you know how to be, you know what I mean, if you got good hygiene and you know how to be sensual and you know how to, you know what I'm saying, pull someone in, you don't have to over sexualize yourself, or you know what I mean, different things like that, like the ways that we talk about women, or particularly, I'm gonna use myself, the ways people talk about me, because I like to be naked all the time. I like to be naked all the time. I like it. If we was all naked all the time, we would be happier people. We would be more confident. And that's the point. And I think that that's like also part of the message in P Valley, is that, you know what I mean? Once you have that real affirmation in yourself and in your identity and in where you are in life and how you're moving forward, and that that's something that you can be more intentional about, but also like you can actually reap the feeling of having a hand in the future, whereas we obviously can't do nothing about our past. You know what I mean? Like, the past is the past, but we can have a hand in how we moving forward, with little steps, with 1,000 little steps, and with, you know what I mean, unlearning and constant like re-education. But just making it possible. Like, I don't need people to compliment me. I don't need you to say anything, whether I'm naked, whether I got on a paper bag. I don't need you to say nothing to me. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean, if people complimented me or if they didn't, or if, you know what I mean, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm not doing it for that. And I think that there's something like in talking about femmes being over sexualized, that we always miss, like sexual assault when someone is wearing something you know what I mean, scantily clad. Like, that's still their right, but what we miss is, I'm not looking at it like that. You know what I mean, you're the patriarchal figure, regardless of that, of the like perpetrator's identity. You're the patriarchal figure that's over sexualized in me. Like, this is clothing, this is expression, this is art. This isn't about over sexualizing or over displaying just one part of the body, or over sexualizing yourself. Like, it's not an attempt for me to over sexualize myself. They make the stuff, I buy it, I put it on, you know, like, and we have the right to do that and to not be harassed and followed and stalked and cyber stalked in response to that.
Absolutely. I think I think I just like, when in terms of my experience, I feel like it's such a hard question. Like, just, I feel like I'm always trying to figure out ways to keep myself happy. And like, because my limitations for pleasure are changing, and like my needs are always changing. So I have to keep myself very open, and knowing that there might be trauma that I haven't addressed yet that are yet to come. So that's something that I have to keep in mind as I live my life and grow older. But also, I think what's helped inform some of my pleasure is informing other femmes' pleasure and uplifting them. I think also informing myself that my body is going to change, and that it won't always necessarily fit inside this idea of what a pleasurable body is supposed to look like, whether my weight fluctuates or not. And I'm always thinking about just like thin privilege and like fat phobia, and how that fits within the conversation of what pleasure and what sort of access to pleasure that people have. And how often I've noticed just like the more weight I gain, or just like even my fat friends that I'm very close to, and like how often they are without, or they're being constricted of their pleasure by his cis men, mainly because of they feel like they can talk to these women however they want to, and I think about that pretty oftenly. Me and my partner are in an open relationship, and so I date sometimes, and I think that's another thing. As I'm growing and realizing, like, oh, my relationship doesn't have to be traditional. Like, it can be whatever the hell I want it to be. And I think that's another thing.
Whatever you need it to be.
Exactly. And I think what's so good about this relationship that I'm in right now is that not only am I with a woman, but I'm also like figuring out, I feel like this is the first relationship where I get to express my needs. And I think sometimes that was very difficult for me being in cishet relationships with men, because it was all performative. It wasn't real, essentially. Like you said earlier, Shaniqua, it was more about what can I do to keep me safe? And also like in terms of like how I view my body, and I think about this, like the times where I was thinner, but I also wasn't happy too. So I think about that too. Like, I think pleasure can exist in any sort of form for me. And I think I have to just keep an open mind as I, like I said, as I get older, and maybe as I get fatter too. And there's nothing wrong with that. And
absolutely.
And the more partners I date in my open relationship too. And also that I think sometimes I don't really my family doesn't really know I'm in an open relationship, because I think they have this idea that open relationship means I'm having sex with anyone with legs. But that's not true.
Which would be your prerogative, but that also doesn't have to be true.
Exactly. And it's more of like, it was more of a common ground that me and my partner both came to decision to.
Yeah.
That that was our way of keeping the excitement and the pleasure and love alive in our relationship. So that's just one way I feel like I've shifted in that sense.
I want to ask you or follow up on something you said, Linnea, which I think is deeply important and can be flagged and highlighted further still. But that's the idea of pleasure as a privilege, and pleasure as often like specially marked out under white cis heteropatriarchal logics for thin, cis, light-skinned, thin women, right? So in terms of you talking about your fat identified Black women friends who you see pleasure being withheld from, I'm curious about what it looks like to construct the fat Black femme body as an object and instrument of pleasure.
I think from the fat friends that I have, the main issue that they run into is, like I said, I mean, first of all, men not respecting them in general, but usually they're seen more as like a body to have sex with. And I feel like there's even more sexualized, or like
women, and I think that is rooted in that historical archetype of the like mammy who's both asexualized but completely hypersexualized at the same time.
Right.
And that trope clouds our ability to see fat Black femmes and women as beautiful and desirable.
Right.
So I guess I'm curious, like a material practice of honoring the beauty and pleasurable possibilities of the fat Black femme body. Like, what does that look like? Even in your everyday practice. So
what does it look like in my art practice?
Art practice, everyday practice.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I think one way to inform your thin privilege is, I think it's pretty simple actually, like just read. follow fat bloggers on Instagram. I follow Ashley Chubby Bunny, and she's really great. She's on Instagram. All her entire feed is dedicated to celebrating fat brown bodies, and that's all she posts. That's just her content, and there's nothing else outside of it. And I think that also has to be made a point that fat bodies need their own space to exist and to be loved and cherished outside of the expectations of what a body is supposed to look like. And also in my work, I've been trying to document even how my body has been changing and doing more drawing with myself. And that's just like me becoming more comfortable with myself. At some point, I wasn't really into the idea of drawing myself in portraits and things like that. But I think, I mean, essentially, all my work is about me, and like I have to become comfortable with drawing my body, even if it's not the ideal or what I want it to be. And I think sometimes that helps me kind of relax and kind of appreciate my body more. And also just drawing my fat loved ones and putting them in places of power, even though a lot of my work exists in this fantasy realm, an idealized realm where these women or femmes can exist untouched or interrupted, their peace is interrupted. I think it helps inform the viewer that this future is possible if we keep working for it and putting these type of bodies in the forefront and making them a priority. So, and there's...
I'd love to see your work. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I have, I'm also a Mary Knoll recipient, and due to COVID, the show wasn't being, you can't go in person and see it, but it does open up on Google Arts and Culture this Friday. If anybody's interested, I'm very happy. And one of the things I have included is my friend who also is a fat femme, Sarah, and she's got like a harness and she's topless. And I just love it. I'm not going to give it away too much. But yeah, I think that's something that I try to practice daily is making for sure I am including fat bodies in my body of work and drawing them more, not drawing idealized bodies and things like that.
I definitely wanted to relate some things from what both of y'all just were sharing about being trans and about having a body journey. I've lost like about 130 pounds in like the last 3 years. And just the whole way that people approach me and the way that I'm sexualized now, you know what I mean? Like in this age and in this space in my life, is completely different than like anything I had ever dealt with prior. And like in my past identity or even as a trans woman. And then like the over sexualization of trans women and how people like automatically write us off and connect us and associate us with sex work. Be that the case or be it not, we have the right to be more than that if that's what, you know what I mean, is going on at that time. And we have the right to, you know what I mean, align with or identify and protect ourselves however we want and to express that however we want. And again, like to put to P Valley is something that everyone participates in, but the femme body, the trans body, the stripper body has to deal with the stigma of it. But y'all the ones filling up the club. You know what I mean? Y'all the ones supporting the OnlyFans and the porn and the, you know what I mean? I ain't got no money to support none of that. You know what I mean? I ain't got $1 for none of them. You get what I'm saying? Like it's enough of you supporting it to the point where this is a multi-billion-dollar industry and where people are awakening to that into it being the oldest profession in the world, that their own autonomy and their own self-governance and their own ability to make a profit in that is something that they shouldn't necessarily be afraid of, just on the strength of being oppressed and being kept out of having the ability to move up an economic platform. And also, like, on the flip side of that, like, again, while a trans woman deals with all the stigma of this life and of this identity, no one talks about, like, how much we're followed, how much we're solicited, how much we're solicited online, how much we're cyberstalked, how much we're grouped together, how much, you know what I mean? Like, how much is put, that there are apparatuses, you know what I mean? Like, there are whole, like, it's like everyone goes to the same perv school almost. Like, how do you all have this unspoken system of how to regard and treat and oppress us, but you still can't find the G-spot?
Anti-Black transphobia, and that's the T. You still can't find the G-spot? So what did you think about the representation of Uncle Clifford in P-Valley? And Little Mermaid?
I'm so happy you just asked me that. I'm going to say something that people like really might like not feel me for, but I think I would argue that Uncle Clifford is a trans woman. Uncle Clifford don't never like self-identify as like a gay man or like a butch queen or like, you know what I mean, any of those specific words. She just got sideburns. Like, I feel like she's a trans woman, not even because of what they didn't label and identify her as, but because all the people that are close to her in her life call her her. The men that work at the club, the girls, her granny, like, everyone calls her a her. And so to me, that's like, you know what I mean? And that's like the expectations of femininity. Like, you got to have your legal documents, you got to have been born in that gender, and you got to be the perfect domestic partner to be a woman or to be a femme. You know what I mean? And to be actualized in that, when really all that matters is how the people in your real life, like, that's what make up my world. Like, I'm not passable because strangers see me and find me passable or something like that. I'm passable because I live my life as a woman. You know what I mean? Like, it's been that way since I was about 10 years old. And those things are even, I feel like when you're really a trans person and you're living in a queer identity before transition or even in transition, you know what I mean? There isn't always a public definition of transness for queer people. So that's what I kind of think about Uncle Clifford.
And Elle, if I could just piggyback and give it back to you, I think, like, grounding the specificity of transgender as language that folks have access to. So in the Mississippi Delta, like, it might not serve Uncle Clifford. And
it's not safe. And they spoke about it. It wouldn't be safe for her too.
With a queer or a trans politics. So I absolutely hear you.
Exactly. And I think the show, as it grows and as the following grows and everything, they'll definitely do more with Uncle Clifford's character and with, you know what I mean, the romance in the show and with developing both of those characters' identities further. But I think, like I said, I think that time will tell, and I think that you know what I mean. Again, we get so caught up on labels, but again, at the end of the day, like I just said, it doesn't matter how people that don't view me in my identity view me, because the whole rest of the world does. You know what I mean? Like the whole rest of everybody else I ever met does. You know, it's just you either from having like a past connection with that person as a transgender person or a non-binary person, or even as a queer person. Like, you always want to associate us with that person that we was, but we're that person for less amount of time than we're who we really are. And you know what I mean? And you were or were not privy to that, to know when that journey really started or to know when we really self-identified ourselves in any way. So, you know, I don't know.
your affirmation. It's
Talk about Uncle Clifford now.
like having that community of folk who regard and see you, like regardless of an outside world in which or within which, Audre Lorde quote, we were never meant to survive, at least not Black, queer, trans, and femme, right?
Mm-hmm. And also like that with Uncle Clifford, like I just feel like again, it's more about what they didn't say about the character. You know what I mean? Like it's more about that people have always had gender variant identities in every race and in every, you know what I mean, culture, and in every like version of history, and it's just something that wasn't publicized or wasn't something mainstream, and you know what I mean, that people were welcome or safe or willing to talk about, and why would you be? And you know what I mean, like even now, like the ask, I seen this post that literally said, it was like a thing about Facebook, like it was a person talking about Facebook blocking something transphobic, right? But they were in the post, and then Facebook responded to them like, we don't consider this hate speech. We can see why you would see it, why you would call it offensive, but you should maybe educate others to
not free Black family
conversations. And that constant expectation, like if it was the 1930s or if you live in the Mississippi Delta in 2020, you know what I mean? Why would you want to put your whole life on, you know what I mean, on Front Street, and people that are advocates like myself, or you know what I'm saying, advocates like all of us as far as our identities, you know what I mean? That's not something that you just wake up and want to do. It's something that kind of finds you and something that you kind of find your way to. So, you know what I mean? That's their right. You have the right to not identify to other people and to, you know what I mean, to have that be a public thing. And I think that that's something that also, like in terms of people that are closeted or people that are on the DL and the correlation to transgender women, even though gay men are sleeping with them too, you know what I mean? Even though gay men are sleeping with them, transgender women are the ones that are looked at as like perpetrators, you know what I mean? Like not perpetrators, but
being demonized.
Being demonized, and specifically in terms of like HIV and in terms of the sexual health implication that people associate with our lifestyles and like drug implications. But the gay men are sleeping with them too. The white men are sleeping with them too. You know what I mean? Like they're all participating in this and then going home. But it's just transgender women that get the rap and that get the trans panic defense to be penalized.
I mean, and you're speaking to a collective repulsion desire dynamic that folks have been conditioned to have towards Black femme bodies, Black trans women's bodies, and that's rooted in colonialism and slavery. So this fascination with a Black female body while marking her, it, they out as ugly at the very same time. Like institutionalizing the rape of Black women and saying that we're the sexually lascivious ones. It goes on and on and on and on, right? So that repulsion desire dynamic is always there.
Oh yeah. I just want to add, there's just a long history of viewing Black femme bodies as a body without pleasure and a body without pain, and you can't have one or the other. And just like I was just reading like a couple months ago that at some point Black women slaves were being performed on surgically by doctors because it was a wide concept that their bodies were incapable of feeling pain. And you see that every day in the doctor's office when Black women are giving birth. They're dying and nobody's listening to them, and when they're in pain and they're telling the doctors that they're paying that they're not listening to them when they're in pain. And I think that, like I said earlier, if you can't have pain without pleasure, and it's kind of just like you need to be able to, I think it's a privilege to be able to freely express both.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that I'm learning, like being able to express when I'm outraged or when I feel justice has been unfulfilled, or, it's just everything about feeling has been stifled and taken away from me. And I've just been having to rediscover that. And I'm sure you all can have had similar experience growing up in a Black femme body.
Absolutely. And I think that connects back to something that Elle mentioned about, what I heard as a politics of privacy. So the right to disclose gender or sexuality or not. So I don't know, Linnea, it feels like balancing both the praxis of self-actualization and self-advocacy while recognizing the extent to which Black women's resistance to these structures, Black femme resistance, to these harmful structures erected on our backs are frequently there to penalize and criminalize us for speaking up and speaking back to power. So even in the example of doctors not paying attention when Black women claim to be in pain, Black femmes are in pain. I had a friend tell me the other day, like I write out a speech that I take to each new doctor and I say, as a Black woman, statistically, like all of these things are going on for me. So if you can't listen to me when I say I'm in pain or I have a concern, then you're not the doctor for me. And I thought that was a really beautiful praxis that I took from her and took away. Like, okay, no, it's important to self-advocate and also to be aware of one's surroundings.
And it's ridiculous how much we have to self-advocate. And I was just thinking about this yesterday. I was on the phone with my psychotherapist and he was like, how's it going? And he's like, you should start talk therapy. And I was just like, it's not going good. I'm like, have you looked at the news? I'm like, Black people are dropping like flies and
Right.
I'm sick of it. And you don't think that this is affecting me in some way? Like, where in your white brain do you not understand that this is something that I think about when I wake up and go to bed? And why do I have to tell, like, I was talking to my partner about this and I'm like, well, if I get a talk therapist, I want that person to be a Black femme, like, or queer. Like, I don't want to have to explain or self-advocate in a space that I'm paying for
to get support.
And I also feel like the work that we're doing is sort of anti-capitalist, and essentially because there are systems built up in the capitalist system that prevent us from getting to where we need to as Black femmes. And I'm thinking about that. I've just been thinking about that a lot. Like, what's going to happen? Like, I was looking through all the talk therapists online and just being like, none of these people are Black. Do you think I want to sit down with someone and tell them about my pain? Like, I just need a safe space. And I always feel like that is something I'm constantly searching for, sexually, emotionally. It's just so much. So.
No, absolutely.
And so many things that we were not able to touch on. I know that we are at time, and I wish the conversation can continue, especially as we were just getting into. It seems like, Linnea, you were touching on mental health for Black femmes and Black trans folk, Black trans women, and it's such an important topic. That we talked, that we began to discuss and continue to discuss. And unfortunately, we have run out of time, but this has been such a vibrant conversation. You all killed it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for talking about pleasure, sexuality, and power. And just so we end with you all's voices, please give me just one word that of how you all are feeling. Just one word of how you're feeling.
Energized. I'm gonna take that back. Sensual, like lovely, like like yes.
I feel full and grateful. I just keep meeting so many great smart Black femmes, and I think this is just a sign. Like, I feel grateful for talking to you all, and I have all these new connections from this conversation, and this is what I need. I don't get to have these conversations with people very often, so I feel very grateful.
I'm also feeling grateful. I'm also feeling deeply seen and held. You all were so wonderful, so it was a treat and a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you. Thank you for your labor and for sharing.
Thank you.
Actually, I do have one last thing. How can people find you and support your work?
To be facetious, you can Google my name, or my Twitter handle is @Shaniqua-Roach.
You can find me online at El Halo on different media platforms, but specifically Facebook. You can find me as El Halo, and then you can connect with Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, Diverse and Resilient, Sheba, Health Connections Inc. as wonderful ways to support my work in the community and the community itself. And you can approach me about donating to me.
I have an artist page on Instagram. It's @Linnea Sproles Artist. I also have a website, linneasproles.com. And I also started tattooing too.
Okay.
So you can find that link to that account on my artist Instagram account. And I've been doing lots of community stuff, so just keep your eyes peeled.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So much gratitude for you all. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in, for everyone who's still with us. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
The 2020 Minority Health Film Festival offers a diverse variety of films and events that we just wouldn't be able to offer in the in-person cinema experience. But I think what really makes it unique is the focus not only on public health issues, but the issues that really concern communities of color. If you're looking for a reason to engage or to try it out, this is the perfect time. Just go to mkefilm.org/MHFF